Question 15 is the perfect example of why it is very important to keep in mind that the creator of the questions is probably an English professor, and that person is probably not the person who wrote the article or the reading. Um, Question 15: A scientist preparing to work with Alzheimer's disease would probably be well advised to study. I think it is very obvious that C and D can easily be eliminated. Um, Throughout the reading, um, there's nothing in the reading that tells us that that involves the study of psychology. Psychology, generally, to simplify what psychology is the psychologist is a guy where you sit on the couch and you talk about problems of childhood. You talk about your problems that stems from problems with your mother, with your father. But that's kind of like a simplified explanation of what psychology is. Nothing in this article um, talks about that area of resolving problems with such a that involves psychology. The article is about basically physically finding uh a genetic marker in the brain, in the cerebrospinal fluid, as a possibility of creating a better diagnosis for Alzheimer's disease. So psychology, we could rule that one out, and also nutrition, we could rule that one out too. It's obvious that nowhere in the article, and you should look back, through the whole article, especially um, you should have annotated, and it would be easy to look through the article, looking through your side notes, that there's nothing about nutrition intervention or using nutrition to diagnose Alzheimer's, or even using nutrition as to alleviate symptoms of Alzheimer's. Although if you've read up about Alzheimer's disease outside of this article, you've probably read up about certain promising nutritional intervention which may slow down the progress of Alzheimer's disease, but that's not in this reading. So since this is a reading test, uh, nutrition is not in this reading. We could rule out nutrition. C and D we could rule out. So let's look at A and B. We know, as you can see here, we know that B, organic chemistry, is the answer. But let's look at A and B. Well, first of all, let me just say this. Why did I say it's important to note that the creator of the question is an English professor? Here's why. I have a science background. I used to work for professors in science, physiology professor, integrated biology professor. I've even worked for medical school professors, and every one of them will think that this question is kind of silly. And I'm not saying that I know more than an English professor, but this is just an area that's not an area of expertise for an English professor, this area involving Alzheimer's disease. And so with that said, we could only choose the best answer that an English professor would pick. And so now we've eliminated C and D. Now we have A and B left, and A and B can both both of them have a good chance of being the answer. Anatomy, organic chemistry. One of the reasons why I say this is a silly question, and the science professors that I've worked for would think it's a silly question, is that before you become a scientist who studies Alzheimer's disease, a scientist who studies Alzheimer's disease is most likely a medical school professor, and they usually have an both an MD and a PhD. I've worked for these guys in the past, And to to have an MD PhD studying Alzheimer's disease or MD PhD study any disease, you have to have both a strong background in anatomy and organic chemistry. I mean, anybody who's pre-med and anybody who's gone to medical school will tell you that you're gonna have to have a strong background in both organic chemistry and anatomy. So that's why this is kind of like a silly question. So the only way to really choose the correct answer is to get into the minds of an English professor. So let's look back at the article. Looking back at the article, reviewing every part, and really with a silly question like that, that's all you could. That's all you can really do. Okay, looking through every part. Part one talks about brain tissue changes. Brain tissue changes, nerve cells. A lot about like nerve cells degeneration, nerve cell malformation. You have brain tissue, nerve cells, CAT scan in seeing the certain characteristics of Alzheimer's and other similar diseases. Characteristics such as the atrophied brain or shrunken brain, widened tissue indentations, enlarged cerebral ventricles. I mean, really, a lot of these could both, an English professor would think that that's both anatomy and organic chemistry. And this paragraph, as you can see in my notes, is about how scientists are describing both anatomical changes and chemical changes. So that's both of the choices that we're trying to rule out, right? Organic chemistry, anatomy. But again, look at the specific items here: nerve cell degeneration, nerve cell malformations, the nerve cell, acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain. And so, I mean, looking at all that, so you have the clinical features, which doesn't really tell us anything for this question, for this silly question. And paragraph 6 is about genetic marker, finding the genetic marker such as Alzheimer's disease associated protein. Genes are proteins, by the way. And so with all this, about proteins, genes, nerve cell malformation, nerve cells, brain tissue, I think instinctively I feel that most English professors will believe that the requirement would be organic chemistry, and that, as you can see, is the correct answer. That's why B is the best choice.